What's up? Jeff from Retro Arcade Gaming on YouTube, and I'm back with a completely new port battle for your viewing pleasure. The last few I've undertaken have been remastered versions of previous work. This one I haven't done before. Our focus for this port battle is going to be the classic racing game Super Sprint, released by Atari Games and Midway Games in 1986. It's a top-down circuit racing game where up to 3 players could drive at the same time. Tracks featured a number of power-ups in the form of wrenches, which can be exchanged to improve traction, acceleration, or top speed. There are also a number of obstacles, including walls, bridges, oil puddles, tornadoes, etc., which are to be avoided. One of the unique things about Super Sprint was the freedom to rotate the steering wheel 360 degrees, which is often difficult to replicate and duplicate the sensation of on a joystick or keyboard. Don't confuse Super Sprint with Championship Sprint, which was released later in 1986 and is almost identical, but features different tracks and a two-player cabinet instead of 3. It's fairly simple to imply that it formed the foundation for some great games to follow, including the Super Off-Road series and Danny Sullivan's Indy Heat. One could argue that Super Sprint is an updated modernization of key games, Black and White Sprint 2 and Sprint 1 titles from the mid to late 70s. I will admit that I struggled with this one more than I have previous port battles. For some reason, most of my control schemes for various systems no longer worked, and I had to reconfigure all of them from scratch. Additionally, there were a couple of titles that I just couldn't get to run properly, which we will talk about a little later on. Aside from that, let's start out as we always do with the arcade original via MAME. The Amstrad Color PC got a release in 1987 from Activision. This one doesn't look too bad. The sounds are from the PC speaker and basically just try to emulate that of a running car, so it's pretty monotonous. Like most of the versions we will play, this one suffers from somewhat touchy and hard to get right controls. The Atari ST got a port in 1987 by Electric Dreams. This one isn't too bad. It looks very good. Sounds aren't terrible. Again, the controls are tricky, but are actually manageable once you get the feel for things. Electric Dreams released a port for the Commodore 64 in 1987. This one looks decent, and the SID music is great, if not really necessary. Like most of these, once you master the control scheme, it is what you would expect. However, mastering the control scheme is an art in and of itself, though. The NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, got an unlicensed release by Tengen in 1989. This one sounds pretty good, looks pretty good. They did a decent job translating the control scheme, as it is the easiest one to master of all the ports I've played so far. A licensed port was released by Altron in 1989 for the Nintendo Famicom in Japan. Not a whole lot different than the Tengen port we just looked at. Again, the control scheme is the best out of most of the ports we've played already. The ZX Spectrum got a port in 1987 from Electric Dreams Software. This one doesn't play too bad. Again, once you get used to the control scheme. The sounds, typical PC speaker sounds, and not stellar by any means. So one of those we couldn't get to work was a updated version for the 128K ZX Spectrum in 2020, released by Tebow and Slider. From my understanding, it is essentially the 1987 release modded with menu music from the Atari ST Port. Like I said, I couldn't get it to play. I could get it to load and get to the title screen, but could never make it any further. There's a YouTube video of gameplay. I'll post that in the video description. Moving on, the PlayStation got a port in 1999 from Digital Eclipse via the compilation title Arcade Party Pack. It's straight up emulation of the actual arcade game, and again, a bit tricky to control at first, but once you know the drill, it's not too bad. The Game Boy Advance got a release in 2005 via the 2-in-1 title Spy Hunter Super Sprint. It plays okay. Again, controls difficult to master. However, it plays very slow. It's almost like the cars are stuck in mud the whole time. It's not a very fluid gaming experience. Just my opinion. The GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Windows PC got a release via the 2003 compilation Midway Arcade Treasures. Again, this one is just straight up emulation of the arcade game, and again, difficult to master the controls on. Today, we're going to take a look at the GameCube release of Midway Arcade Treasures. Warner Brothers Interactive released a compilation title entitled Midway Arcade Treasures in 2012 for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 that included Super Sprint. Here's a look at that one. Again, a straight up emulation and difficult to control until you get the hang of it. The Atari 2600 got a port from Atari themselves in 1988. Yes, 1988. If you were still buying games for your Atari 2600 in 1988, you got what you probably deserved. Typical Atari 2600 sounds, which means not much, and the graphics leave a lot to be desired. It actually doesn't play too bad, though, once you get the hang of the controls. Let's face it, it's a racing game to make X number of laps faster than your opponent. A Homebrew was released for the Commodore Amiga in 2021 by Geezer Games. This version requires a stock AGA Amiga, stands for Advanced Graphics Architecture. It plays well, despite some steering difficulties, at least in emulation, and it sounds pretty good. Felipe Guchardin ported, or rather reverse engineered, the Atari ST release of Super Sprint to the Commodore Amiga in 2012. Unfortunately, another one of those I can't find a playable copy of, so you're going to have to take my word for it. I will post a link to gameplay in the video description. Moving on, the TRS-80 got a clone in 1987 entitled Grand Prix Challenge. It was published by Diecom Products, authored by Dave Dyes. Sounds are pretty minimal in this one. There are no collisions between the vehicles, just walls, and for the life of me, I couldn't get the joystick to function. So you get to enjoy this as I try to play on the keyboard. Additionally, for some reason, I could not get this one to play in full screen. So this is the window version that I've kind of cropped and scaled to a full screen presentation. Our friend TrickySoft did a clone for the BBC Micro, but it's based more on the key games, black and white titles Sprint and Super Sprint 2 from the 70s. But I'll give him a shout out here, and I'll include a link down in the video description if you want to check it out. It was also part of the Midway arcade level pack for LEGO Dimensions, released for the PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Wii U in 2015. Again, I don't have a copy, so I'm not going to include it here. With that, we've wrapped up our look at most of the ports, clones, and homebrews for the classic arcade game Super Sprint. If you like my content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Until then, we'll see you next time. Happy gaming. Peace.